Hello everybody, this is Auntie Reading, and I wanted to take you through my March 2023 reading wrap-up. I am considering doing a wrap-up for these every month, especially now that I have a TBR game. I think that would be a really great way to give quick reviews on the books that I read, because I don't tend to make full-length videos about one book. I will be putting up screenshots of the Storygraph info here. I'm just using Storygraph and my own personal spreadsheet to talk about the books. So in the month of March, I read 12 books. This equaled 2,153 pages and 81.53 hours. So I did a pretty good amount of audiobook reading. I think that this was actually almost half of my audiobook reading for this entire year so far. Storygraph has those moods, so as you can see, mysterious and emotional are tied for my top moods. I did read a lot of mystery-ish books, so I'm not surprised by that. I had one book that was so slow-paced, 6 that were fast-paced, and 5 that were medium-paced. In terms of physical books with page numbers, 2 of them were under 300 pages, and then the rest, which are 5 of them, ended up being 300 to 499 pages, so that middle length that Storygraph makes. As for audiobooks, I had one audiobook that was under 8 hours, I had one audiobook that was over 16 hours, and then I had 3 that fell in the middle range between those. A quarter of the books that I read were nonfiction, so that ended up being 3. As for genres, my most read genres were LGBTQI+, young adult, and mystery. I am not surprised by those at all. Those tend to be my most read. I will typically have like a thriller in there too. So this graph is slightly inaccurate because of the fact that one of these books was an ebook, but Storygraph doesn't have the ebook version listed, so I just wrote it's counted as print in this chart. So I had 1 ebook, 6 print, and 5 audiobooks. That is a very big change for me. I typically don't read as many physical books. I'm more of an ebook reader, but because I've been going to the library religiously, that's something that has come up where I'm getting a ton more physical books, and I've really been loving my audiobooks as well. I typically wouldn't have that high of an amount of physical books, but who knows, I might be turning over a new leaf. As for star rating, I had 5 5-star reads, and I had, my lowest was a 2.75. So I'm actually going to go over all these books individually by rating. Some of these books that I'm going to be talking about, I've already returned to the library, so I'll just post a picture up here when I'm talking. So on the 23rd, I finished If I Can Give You That. It's by Michael Gray Bula, and I gave it a 2.75 stars. This I kind of rated a little bit after the fact, but it wasn't that memorable. I found the character kind of childish, especially for a young adult. It felt like I was reading a middle grade. It felt like this character was definitely on the younger end, even though they were allegedly about to turn 18. I am 20, so I wasn't that long ago that age, but they definitely felt super childish, and I was finding myself really frustrated with these characters. But I read this for Trans Rights Readathon, so that was a fun little addition. My next rated was a book that I rated as an e-arc, so I read this in an ebook format. It is a Pill for Promiscuity. It's a series of essays about a bunch of queer people's lives after the introduction of PrEP and other drugs, preventative drugs for HIV and AIDS. So that's something that was definitely a very interesting read. I wrote a whole blog post on it. If you are interested, I can link that down below, or you can find it on my link tree. But yeah, I liked it okay. I really enjoy reading nonfiction essay collections, so that's definitely something I want to do more of. I rated 2 books 3.5 stars, one of which was The Virgin Suicide. This was my slowest book according to Storygraph. It did take me a while to read. I read it as an audiobook, and that's definitely one of those books that is kind of grotesque to read as an audiobook, because you're hearing all of the really messed up things in your ears. Yeah, I gave it a 3.5. That was another rating that I did sort of after the fact. I liked it. It was definitely really memorable. I want to watch the movie to see what they changed and all of that. And then my other 3.5 star was So You've Been Publicly Shamed. This is a book that I found really relevant to my career path, so I had been trying to read it for a while. I finally finished it in a physical format, even though I had started out as an ebook. I had to pick up the physical to be able to finish it. I really want to pick up more of Jon Ronson's books. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think that this is like the quintessential book for if you ever want to create a Twitter account, you should have to read this book first. That's how I feel. It talks about the psychology of cancellation, well, what we call now cancellation. It talks about like the effects that it has on people, sort of being judged in a jury of your own peers in the public eye. So super enlightening book. So the next books I rated 3.75 stars. The first one is Date Me Bryson Keller. I read this in a physical format. I really loved this. This is what I wish some of the queer fiction that I've read recently was like. I kind of miss it. I read Always the Almost for April, so I'll be doing a review on that, but I didn't really necessarily enjoy that one as much as I enjoyed Date Me Bryson Keller. Same with If I Can Give You That. Definitely low in comparison to Bryson Keller. So I wish I had read that one first so that I'd have a really nice surprise when I got to Date Me Bryson Keller, but I ended up being kind of disappointed because those were like relatively close together. The next book that I read was The Outsider. It is a 19-hour long audiobook and I flew through this thing. I was having so much fun. The first 2 acts I could literally not put down. I had been looking for any excuse. I was doing anything I could to continue to listen to the audiobook, and then the 3rd act happened. And I think that this is kind of common with Stephen King books, which I am actually doing a challenge to read most, if not all, of his books. But he's been known for getting a little bit wordy when he doesn't need to, and it was definitely something where I realized that as soon as I realized the paranormal aspect, I was just having less fun. I think I didn't really like the way that it was implemented. I think that sometimes when there's the idea of, is this a paranormal thing or is this human action, I think that's very interesting. But I do not really enjoy the just like solution of, oh, it's a monster. Now I have to defeat the monster, which I know he kind of does do, so I know I'm kind of contradicting myself by saying I want to read more of his books, but yeah, the first 2 acts of this book were incredible. I had rated 3.75 because of the fact that the 3rd act droned on and I just wasn't really feeling it. The next book that I rated was The Eighth Detective. I read it in audiobook format, but I do actually have the physical copy from the library right here with me. I gave this 4.25 stars, and I really enjoyed this. I read it right after finishing a different book that I'm going to talk about shortly. So I was kind of mentally comparing these two, but I really enjoyed it. Essentially, there is an author who is adding a few inconsistencies into his previous works, and our main character is an editor trying to edit down his works for republication, and so she starts noticing these inconsistencies and something really strange is happening. So we actually read primarily his works, and then in between his short stories that are murder mysteries, we hear their conversations. It was a really interesting format. It was a little bit confusing with audiobook because of the fact that there are more like page breaks and stuff that make more sense in the physical format, but I really enjoyed it. It was just a really fun read, and yeah, I gave it 4.25 stars. I actually had this on my April TBR, but I managed to kind of binge it right before April started. Because I recorded my TBR video a few days before April. I had this as the prompt for bad cover, and that is because it is like a murder mystery type deal, and the cover to me personally is giving sci-fi. So that's why I said it was a bad cover. But yeah, super happy I read this. Alright, now to the 5 stars. I ranked a ton of books 5 stars. So the first book I will talk about is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I had been putting off reading this because it sounded exactly like something I wanted, and that terrified me. It was like on paper the best book for me, and that scared me because I thought for sure that I would get my hopes up. But I haven't. I made sure I could read it all in one day and binge it. And so now I plan on reading the second and the third. I have both of them out from the library, so those are going to be read very soon. I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I was raving to my boyfriend, like, please pick it up. I think you're going to love it too. It's a really easy read in the sense that it's never a struggle to turn a page. If anything, it's a struggle to put down. My next 5-star read was Loveless by Alice Oseman. This is my first Alice Oseman book because I'm going to be reading Heartstopper this month for the Realmathon, probably during the peace treaties, so I get more points for those. But I really loved this. I really loved the representation. I think I'm a little bit biased because I am the president of the queer organization at my school, so when I'm seeing a college kid interact with a queer organization on their campus, I'm just sort of like having an emotional attachment to it. But I really liked it. I thought the queer rep was great. I really loved the characters, and it's something that I read exactly a month ago as of filming, but I still know exactly why. I loved it. My next 5-star read was an audiobook, and this was my shortest audiobook. It was 6.5 hours, but because of the way that I read it, it was really just like a 3-hour read, and that was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I really loved this. I think it is imperative that you listen to the audiobook because she narrates it. Of course, while her getting the actual physical book is great, I think that there's so much more added to it when you hear the actual author read it. At one point, her voice breaks, and I think about that all the time when I think about this book. It's really impactful. It's really interesting. It's emotional. Make sure you're paying attention to triggers before you read, but I really loved this, and while I was reading it, I was like, this is definitely getting 5 stars. Another book that I was reading and knew I was going to give 5 stars before I was even 30% of the way through was Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. And I've tweeted about this thing. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. This book is, we are introduced to the main character who says, I'm the editor of this author, and I didn't know that this book would change my life. Read it if you dare, essentially. And so then we go into this story, and you completely forget about the main character. Her name is Susan. You completely forget about her. And you just kind of start living this life, and then suddenly, right as everything, there's going to be a climax, just things start happening in Susan's life. It's incredible. I'd highly recommend it. I really loved the audiobook. There was a different narrator for the, when it was like talking about the book and then the actual story. So it's a really fun book within a book, similar to The Eighth Detective, but they were different enough that they each stood out to me in their own ways, and they're just really fun. My last 5-star read of the month was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I am a big Shirley Jackson girl. I have written a paper on her before. I wrote a paper on her in high school, but I realized that I had never read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I read the book Holding Up the Universe in February, and the main character is really attached to We Have Always Lived in the Castle, so it was like kind of just fate that I was like, I definitely have to read it ASAP. So I got it from my local library, my school library, and it was this like copy from the 70s. It was absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I loved that book. It was like gothic horror in the best way. I understand why it's a classic. That is probably my favorite Shirley Jackson book that I read. I read a lot of her short stories. I absolutely loved this book. It's just the feeling of reading it that I really enjoyed. And of course there's a little twist. I always love a good horror book with a twist, a good mystery with a twist. And yeah, I just I just loved it. This is one of those things that I'm like, this is going to become my personality for a while. This is going to be the book that I recommend everyone. I'm going to name animals like Meerkat and like name things after this character. It's just such a like an impactful book, I think. Do I think that the main character in Holding Up the Universe should have been reading it? No, but she has good taste. That was my March 2023 reading wrap up. Let me know what you guys read. Let me know if you want me to do more wrap-ups in the future. Let me know what videos you want to see. I am right now doing a reading vlog, so that should be up probably after this, but let me know what you want to see. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good night or day wherever you are, and please subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Let me know what you want to see. I'm kind of open to anything, so thank you so much for spending time with me.